So we're all kind of living in a sort of a post-Gerstmann world now, and I'm not sure where to begin on that thing or even how we want to approach it because we don't prepare for this podcast.
Take mental notes.
But I do want to say, first of all, we are going to talk about this issue because really it's hard to not talk about this issue. But I am going to issue the standard disclaimer, which is very necessary, that we don't know anything more here about what went down with GameSpot's firing of Jeff Gerstmann, other than what all of you listening know from various news stories and blogs and forum messages, all of which involve a lot of speculation. So some of what we're talking about is just us being kind of righteous blowhards without any real information, but that doesn't mean we can't be righteous blowhards, because goddammit, that's our right.
Springboard to talk about the industry.
It definitely,
and the way that things work, the way that we interface with publishers and developers and
right.
our editorial teams and our marketing teams and all these things. And by talking around it and sort of about, that and the state of the industry, I think it does make sense, and it will show, and I believe, once we do talk about it, it'll show you to some extent why it's plausible to take the speculation and to connect the dots in the way that people are connecting them.
Right.
Why it's a possible move for people to make, not why it's possible that this is actually I'm tripping over myself. Basically,
we know what you mean.
That it's not very inconceivable, and that the thought isn't necessarily. It's not just insane conspiracy theory.
The fact that it is very, very believable in of itself is very telling and sad. The fact that a story like this could come out and we all are sort of assuming it's probably true or aspects of it are true, this should never be the case in journalism. This should just this rumor shouldn't even have happened.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it did is why the story is so big and why it's not going away for a lot of us. I mean, I'm sure CNET and GameSpot and IDOS are all hoping it just goes away now, but I think for a lot of us, it's not really going to, because it raises some huge, huge questions. If you're listening and you don't know what happened, the things we do know are that Jeff Gerstmann, who's the editorial director, I think was his title, at GameSpot, he'd been there for 11 years, and he was fired from GameSpot. And from what I understand, from the stories we've read anyway, he was summarily fired, meaning he showed up at work and found out he was fired. Right?
Exactly.
This is what we know. We also know that around the same time, GameSpot had a massive advertising campaign going on their website, on the front door of their site, for the game Kane and Lynch from IDOS. And we also know that Gerstmann had written a largely unfavorable review and had filmed a video review of the same game. Both were fairly negative.
And then the video review was taken down without explanation.
So all in the same sequence of events, Mr. Gerstmann lost his job. The video review was pulled down. The print review received some edits, and then shortly thereafter, the ads got removed from GameSpot. Right, and then we started seeing some blog posts from the GameSpot editors themselves, referring to the incident, and a couple websites. Kotaku and Joystick started picking up some comments, and Valleywag, a Silicon Valley kind of gossip site, started getting anonymous info about what had gone down there that day at GameSpot.
From someone purporting to be a GameSpot employee.
Right. So, one thing is that all of us here know, all of us in this room, that the game publishers aren't happy when they get negative reviews. This happens all the time. They will get cranky to the point of calling our bosses and saying, we're going to pull our ads if you don't, since you don't like our games, apparently we don't need to advertise with you. This happens all the time. And again, we can't prove it. We don't know we don't know what really happened.
This is what I was saying, why it's not entirely unrealistic, is that we know that publishers exercise a great deal of pressure on writers for magazines and websites, and that there are all these pressures to give games high scores. So they might be they'll be indirect. I mean, there's that where, in most cases, people on the editorial side of the firewall shouldn't hear about this, right? I mean, they will go to the advertising departments. But every time we talk about it and we say we know it exists, like I've heard other people say, oh, we know it exists, but it's never happened to us. It's like, well, I don't believe that, because you got to know it exists somehow.
Right.
Once in a while, a whisper will slip through the firewall, and you'll be made aware of the fact that, oh, someone's punishing us.
Actually, that's true. I can definitely tell you that there's times where it will filter down to me, say, as editor-in-chief of this magazine, that some advertiser got annoyed about something we wrote in the magazine, and it went down the chain, and it gets to me, but then even getting to me is unusual.
Right.
But when it gets to me, I won't often tell one of you, because it's just an unfair pressure to have to face. You shouldn't ever have to think about that.
And I mean, I think that's I want to hit this up later, but I think a lot of times if you look very closely at reviews and stuff, I will, at least in my mind, I will think that I see people writing for publishers to some extent, or writing with an awareness of the publisher rather than writing just for their audience. They'll do certain things that I think are indicative of that. But so in addition to that side, we have, let's talk about a possible solution there in the dream world is for magazines and websites to have what are known as non-endemic ads.
Right.
And that means that they're not advertisements for the products that we cover in our editorial.
Right.
So in other words, Mountain Dew, we don't write about Mountain Dew, that's fine. Mountain Dew is not going to get pissed off and say they're not going to support us because we said that their new latest drink at Taco Bell tastes like crap.
Right. This is totally my dream scenario, that the game press, that the gaming media, all across the board for all of us, that we can get away from being reliant on the very people we write about to support us with advertising. It doesn't happen in any other media right now, and it's one of the reasons why "quote unquote" games journalism is in such an infantile state. Like I was saying before we went on the air, it's as if TV shows were had product placement that was then, that was not product placement. Like let's say you're watching According to Jim, and Jim Belushi says man, this Diet Pepsi tastes like urine. And the guys who make Diet Pepsi who bought an ad are going, well, what the fuck?
Right.
Fuck you. Why is Jim Belushi saying Diet Pepsi tastes like piss?
And in some cases,
we're pulling our ads. Fuck you.
Because the review will appear on the very same, opposite page of an advertisement. It would be like Belushi saying that and then it cutting immediately to a commercial break and then it being Diet Pepsi.
Right. So Pepsi can just take their urine-flavored drink and go home. Mm-hmm. What we need here is a magazine and a website like Gamespot or everything full of automobile ads and soda ads and potato chip ads where you can
you can make fun of McGriddles,
where you can write a 6 out of 10 review and not get fired for it.
Yeah, exactly. People laughed at that McGriddles thing, but that is the route to honesty.
Seriously, don't look the McGriddle in the mouth.
Yeah.
And that would go a long way to solving that part of the problem. I don't believe that is the solution, though, because the difference is if, say, the show, say, what is this? I've never watched it. According to Jim, is that what you called it?
Yeah, I haven't watched it either.
You never watched it.
So say, what
except
if,
for the first 5
in order
seasons.
to write the scripts for According to Jim, they needed the help of Pepsi Company. Mm-hmm. And this is the circumstances that we're in, because say if we even want to write something that's not a preview or that's not a review, we can write reviews free of their assistance. We can go to the store and buy them.
Sure.
There's another pressure there, and that's to be timely. And to be timely and to be sooner, you have to get the code in advance from the developer and the publisher. If they're pissed off at you, they're not going to want to give it to you in advance. If you're going to write let's go beyond the preview and say we're going to do a story like now, in our next issue we're looking at all these reasons why games are delayed, some classic cases of games that have been delayed, and So if we want to talk about, these case studies, what happens? Paint a broad picture by talking to all these individuals and seeing what in particular went wrong or what happened, what stalled their development process. Well, if one of those companies that made one of those games is upset with you because you gave a score that they weren't happy with to one of their games, or the publisher, maybe the developer just fine, they're like whatever. But the publisher's not happy, you will not have access to those people.
Right.
So again, that's limiting your information. And almost every story that you could possibly write for one of these, for one of our sites or magazines, at some point is going to need some source or some sort of contact. And
well, that's a totally separate issue
practice, though. Yes,
from the advertising anyway.
It's another issue. Yes, but I just want to look at to make it in the broad sense all these pressures for doing positive things. But so that is still a pressure. If we give this game this score, the score that we truly believe it deserves, we know that we risk not getting information, not getting the next cover story based on the game that developer makes, another game by the same publisher, any follow-up stuff, any afterthought sorts of interviews, stories like the kind I'm talking about. So all these are there too.
One would think that our chances of getting the Hellgate London 2 cover story are probably severely diminished at this point, right?
I would say they're probably slim to none. And of course, it's not the publishers, it's not our right to demand any of this information.
Of course.
That's the thing. This is all private, they're making entertainment to sell it. These are businesses. They don't owe anyone anything. They don't need to let you go to their events. They don't need to give you screenshots, and you need to speak to the people who make the games. And they do it because it's in their interest to get the word out. But if the word that you're getting out is negative, or if they think that when the review comes it's going to be negative, then they can pull it. And so that's a thing that makes me wonder. I mean, is it even to the extent where we need to separate magazines and sites that do editorial stuff from those that do reviews? Do you have to keep the two apart in general? Because it's always on the reviews where you get slammed. Right.
But if you keep those things separate, then we are just a wing of their PR department.
Not necessarily, though. You can write critical previews. I'm a firm believer in that, and all this, the sorts of stories that I'm talking about.
But the critical preview, if it's critical, is going to have the same negative impact.
That's true. But so the other story, what if it was entirely feature-based?
Right.
And it was all thematic, like say, you're looking at various trends in 2007 game making and all these things, and you do need to talk to the developers, or you want to look at how a studio functions and how it works, how it differs from others.
I mean, I totally hear what you're saying. And say what?
There are places that do that.
There's like Gamasutra and stuff like that,
Right, that's true. Yeah. But, I mean, look at something even like Entertainment Weekly. I mean, this is a magazine that comes out every week, and they have totally insidery, suck-uppy interviews with people, and they have glowing previews or whatever. But then in the same issue, they'll give Fs to major movies or Ds, or to major CDs. So obviously, in that case, the machinery is in place where they are able to take these very critical stances and still operate with or work with the same companies to get insider information. I mean, what's the difference there? How come it works there? I don't know if
maybe we're not aware of. Maybe there are cases where there's grudge holding and stuff, and there are covers that get changed in the last minute because one company is more eager to work with you than another. Or maybe sometimes there is a bit of a fallout when that cover story runs in the same issue as a negative review.
Right. I mean, it also probably is that, Entertainment Weekly is owned by, what is it, a Time Warner? So really, the advertising is happening way, way, way up the food chain,
right? And it is non-endemic. I mean, there's, I mean, that is there. I mean, that's the point you're making is that's a huge help, and I think that I agree. That's an absolutely important, place to get to. But I just don't think it solves everything. I think you have to deal with that pressure, and I think this is why I like to talk about is that I never hear publicly anyone acknowledging these things, Watch your mic. You're rubbing your beard.
I'm rubbing my beard, and it's making. Sorry.
And it's like just pretending they don't exist doesn't make it not true. I mean, immediately you see so many people's reactions from other outlets. Well, we never do this. I can guarantee you that nothing like this ever happens here. And that's to simplify the thing. It's like, well, of course it hasn't happened, and we can all say yes. No one's ever told us that we need to say to be kinder or to raise our scores, but we also are all aware of the way the business works and the pressures. And we do know the good things that come with kissing ass. Mm-hmm. And when you write reviews in such a way that you're basically trying to sell a product, when you're writing it like a sales pitch, there's good things that come of that, you know? Mm-hmm. And there's other things too. I mean, there's so many different lines that you can cross that cause problems, and everyone's aware of that. They're full of shit if they say otherwise. So if you, for example, if we had an exclusive review on our cover, and we were to say, wow, this isn't that good, we're not going to give it a good game. Someone in that department would say, we better give this publisher a heads up.
Yes.
Because this is going to seriously strain our relationship. Or if you just do it, then that would be it. You would do it and they would be pissed off and you'd face all the repercussions that we've just outlined, you know? So that's there. And that means that is still a subtle pressure. So if you're the person reviewing the game and you know it's the cover story and it's the exclusive review, and you know, in addition to that it's supposed to be the big sell for your magazine, it's supposed to, you know, there's even, since more eyes are going to be on it, and it's going to be the only representative of scores on Metacritic for some period of time, that pressure is there.
Well, this is the big reason why we stopped doing exclusive reviews a while ago, to avoid this issue entirely, this specific issue of exclusive reviews. We stopped doing them in this magazine because we didn't want to have to deal with that idea.
Right. Anything you can do to just reduce that pressure. I mean, so yeah, it's like, well, instead of burning all these bridges because we know we wouldn't, you know, we would basically call it like we see it. And we were also aware that potentially means burning bridges with a lot of people over these high stake things. Yeah. The high stakes of it, I think also, it's kind of like reaching this hysteria and this fever pitch this year. In all the years I've been in the business, you've got much more experience, so you can compare it to your experience. But it seems like this year is worse than ever.
And this Gerstmann thing, this is, to me, this was inevitable. Something like this, like it's been building. This bullshit pressure that the publishers will put on the media because they have so much power over people in charge at the media outlets, financial power, monetary power, that eventually somebody was going to buckle.
The firewall was going to break.
Somebody was going to do it, and it appears to have happened here. Maybe it didn't. Maybe we don't know enough.
We have no idea.
We don't know.
But that's yet another reason why we're not dismissing it immediately. Why we're at least entertaining the thought along with everyone else.
Right. And, you know, I mean, look, it took CNET, what, like a week here or a few days to come up with a kind of public announcement. First of all, the fact that they had to make a public announcement. You know, who has to write a public press release about a employee? When does this ever happen in the games media? That a press release comes out because an editor got fired?
Right.
I mean, clearly there's something fishy about this that they're acknowledging. But I mean, of course, their press release says there was nothing fishy about it. That in fact, actually, I have it in front of me.
Why don't you read that, Joe?
I'll read this. This is on the front page of GameSpot. The headline is Gerstmann GameSpot Part Ways. That's the headline. The deck is, after nearly 11 years of news, reviews, and previews, editorial director's tenure ends. GameSpot editors address controversy surrounding his departure. Okay, that was the long-winded deck. Here's the article. The past week marked the end of an era at GameSpot. After over a decade in a variety of editorial roles, Jeff Gerstmann's tenure as editorial director has ended. It just ended. You know,
right.
It has ended.
There are,
nice
to be fair
there.
Though, when you terminate an employee,
well, of course,
you're not able to go make a public statement as to why, and then the employees.
Right, they weren't going to say Jeff Gerstmann's tenure as editor has ended because we fired his ass.
Right,
or
who knows what it could be? Not him, but take someone else. Say there was, at company X, someone was fired for sexual harassment or something like that. You're not going to go out and say. And I don't mean to imply that this is the case with him whatsoever, right. but by way of analogy to show that it's one of the reasons why you don't disclose the reasons that you fire people.
Of course.
And I mean, there's so much potential for lawsuits and going back and forth. So I'm just saying to keep it in mind, I mean, they aren't going to be able to say that much.
Of course they can't. And this is why Jeff can't either. Neither parties can, which is why we're really going to honestly never know exactly what happened here.
Right. Until, and you wouldn't even know, like, say, if he signed, along with the severance package, he signed an agreement to not talk for X number of years.
Right.
Even after those years pass and then he does talk about it, then that's still one side of the story.
Right. In fact, they say, I'm skipping a little bit here, but due to legal constraints and the company policy of GameSpot parent CNET Networks, details of Gerstmann's departure cannot be disclosed publicly. However, contrary to widespread and unproven reports, his exit was not a result of pressure from an advertiser. And then they quote, neither CNET Networks nor GameSpot has ever allowed its advertising business to affect its editorial content, said Greg Brannon, CNET Networks Entertainment's vice president of programming. Quote, the accusations in the media that it has done so are unsubstantiated and untrue. Jeff's departure stemmed from internal reasons unrelated to any buyer of advertising on GameSpot. Though he will be missed by his colleagues, Jeff's leaving does not affect GameSpot's core mission of delivering the most timely news, video content, in-depth previews, and unbiased reviews in games journalism, said Ryan McDonald, executive editor of GameSpot Live. GameSpot is an institution, and its code of ethics and duty to its users remains unchanged. Okay, so that's their official statement. You know, without any real evidence or quotes or anything to the contrary, all you can do is take it at face value.
And, well, you do look, I mean, the dots are at least worth examining, and some of those, as, you know, we pointed out, are when it seems like everyone who works for the company is uniformly distraught and being really, really weird and awkward about it, you know, and understandably so, you know, by which I mean to blog and then 5 minutes later edit that down and apologize. And,
well, let's take it from our own perspective. Like, imagine, you know, well, I guess you could take me, right? I would kind of be Jeff's parallel. He was at GameSpot for 11 years, and I've been here for about 11 years. Mm-hmm. So imagine you come in one day, and I've been fired. A review I had written was pulled. A video review I had done was pulled. And now you're supposed to carry on. I mean, what's going through your heads?
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine. Well, maybe part of it is like, thank God that moron's gone. Mm-hmm. But, you know, maybe the rest of it is, you know, well, geez, what am I supposed to write now? What happens the next time I write a negative
that
review?
You would talk to us too.
Right.
And then
all of a sudden I'm just gone.
And then I would assume that you would talk to us, and then at that point we'd say, well, we've worked with you for however many years. We feel like we know you and we can trust you, and that it's not, you know, then we can judge whether or not we feel you're giving us some bullshit story and you really did get fired for stealing or something else ridiculous, and now you're making this whole thing up.
Right. Maybe I was like taking a dump in the urinal. and,
you wouldn't want to admit that.
No, right. Of course. I'd rather probably just say that I lowballed a review rather than admit that. So, and that was not, in fact, my dump in the urinal last week.
I wanted to go back to the sort of hysteria that's happening this year. The most sense I could make from that is that the stakes are now so high to successfully make and market a game that Ryan's laughing. Sorry, I'm trying to change the tone
serious.
from the dumps in the urinals. No, but so it costs an extraordinary amount of money to make what we call a AAA game, right? Mm-hmm. And the market is tighter than ever. I mean, you see these big games that you know, were developers and publishers have clearly spent millions making them and marketing them, and then they fail. And that's like a huge wager to make, and not many companies can withstand failing, you know, losing those bets indefinitely. And so they want to do everything in their power to hedge that bet. Mm-hmm. And scores is one way to do it, and that's also tied into Metacritics. And that, I think, is another, in addition to the high stakes nature of things now, mm-hmm. is also the way that aggregate scoring sites, the role that those sites play.
Right.
Because it's, even if in the past, before those sites existed, you had whatever EGM say gives a game a 6 that a lot of other sites gave a 7.5 or an 8, you know. It's just, well, that's fine. That's an EGM thing. But now when the employees of these companies are getting bonuses based on the Metacritic score, and that's factoring into whether or not they immediately greenlight a sequel even before they have sales figures, you know, then it's more, well, what is your 6 doing to the average? Mm-hmm. What is it? I mean, it's influencing it. And so when you can just look at the whole thing, it's like, well, what are you doing for our Metacritics thing? And I hear this like time and time again from people that work in development and PR and everything, is that they live and die by that average. Some of
Well,
them,
we've talked
right,
about this
yeah.
in the podcast before, right? That's the phone call we always get.
Right.
How come it was 7 on or 8 on Metacritic and you guys gave it a 5?
You know, well, because we thought differently about the game.
And
But that's
and
what
we
really
always
sticks
Or
out
even,
to me.
it could even just be, you know, they're not weighting our numbers properly. You know, there's
Well,
a
yeah,
whole
there's that, too.
thing where the averages aren't necessarily
It is
weighted.
different. And when
Yeah.
we say a 5 is an average, we try to enforce that. And this is like, say, for example, if you look at the GameSpot Kane Lynch review and the video review that's been pulled, when I listen to those and when I read that, I don't see a 6 at all. I see like a 4, you know, maybe somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 or whatever. And I don't see the 6 at all. I'm like, oh, he's describing an unfun game through and through, and talking about some potential it might have had but didn't deliver on. But that, in my mind, and then saying, hey, that's an above-average score. That doesn't add up. So, yeah, I mean, like that's a difference in between. That's indicative of the fact that, you know, in our rubric of 5 is the average.
I do actually find it ironic that of all things for this to blow up over, it is a game like this where, you know, which by all accounts is fairly mediocre. And in fact, his 6 isn't that far out of line even from the Metacritics. I mean, this isn't like
I don't think it's out of line at all. No.
a game that was getting 9.5s or something that this guy had, you know, such a wildly different opinion from everybody else.
Right.
Not that the things are related at all. We know that his review and his leaving were not, in fact, related, according to CNET. Let's clarify that. They've cleared the air now. So, lest I be accused of throwing stones, I'm not.
Yeah, we know. We've explained that. I mean, so earlier I was saying how sometimes it seems to me like a writer of a review is writing for a publisher.
Sure.
A little bit. And one bit of evidence for that, I don't think it might be deliberate. I don't think it's ever conscious where someone says, I got to make sure that this is just okay for the publisher. But again, it's like when I talk about these pressures, they're indirect, but they're there in the back of your mind. And I think they influence the way you go about things. So there's this phenomenon in game reviews, and I don't quite have a name for it. Maybe someone can help me coin one, but it's basically a flip-flop, you know, or it's kind of like letting something critical slip through and then immediately backtracking and apologizing it away. It's like, I didn't really mean to say a negative thing. This is really
it's a bit of a straw man, right? I mean, it's a
harebrained analogy I got is that chimpanzees have been documented to, you know, it's going somewhere. Well, they basically show their teeth. They bare their teeth when they're frightened, right? But some chimps have also been observed hiding, covering their mouth after they've shown it, because in a dominance hierarchy, say you're one of the more dominant figures and you've inadvertently revealed that you're afraid of someone that's subordinate to you, you want to cover that up. You don't want to hide it.
Right.
They've also covered not to take it back to sex, but they'll cover their genitals and stuff if they have an erection and they're seen by a female that is actually not supposed to be in his access, you know. So it's kind of like that. I just feel like you read these things and it's like, hey, you just got caught baring your teeth. You better cover that shit up now.
Right.
Before someone notices and calls out the fact that you were actually doing something you weren't supposed to be doing, and that's actually being a critic, being critical. So an example would be this from a major source. It says, the pretty facelift and refined game mechanics are great, but they can only mask the fact that SmackDown 07 is still a frustrating button masher. And then the very next sentence is, that's not to say it isn't an enjoyable experience, however. SmackDown 07 is an undeniably good-looking game. So, I mean, like in there you have, a frustrating button masher, and then suddenly it's enjoyable. I mean, well, what is it? You know, I mean, and not saying everyone does it, but it's fairly common. I think if you start looking, you'll see it over and over again. I mean, to be fair, it's everywhere. I'm sure it's in our own magazine. I saw something went up on One Up today where, I mean, it was immediately, it said, you know, unfortunately the game lacked tangible feedback when we shot an opponent, and occasionally repeated fire would seem to do nothing but bounce off enemy armor. And then the next sentence again is, however, the graphics look polished, the map layouts were strong, and the grenades were a blast to use. So,
well, some of this is just probably writing ability and structure. I mean, it's completely like any product in any piece of art or literature, whatever. has its pros and cons, right? I mean, so being able to say, like, this one part of the game is great and this other part of the game sucks, it's not, there's nothing wrong with that,
right?
Of course. It's sort of like juxtaposing these
it's
within
the fact
two
that
sentences.
They're always juxtaposed, and it's always in that order too. Where good, some good comes around immediately after the bad to try to undo it.
Right.
To show you,
But to be fair, that could just be a result of this established, like, this is how game reviews go structure.
It could be that too, where you just see, exactly. You
this,
look at,
but this, but this.
There are all
this,
these
but this conclusion.
Right. There are all these templates to writing reviews.
Let's send that out to our staff. Please follow this format.
And then, like, my one complaint is, you see so many. There's always this, like, one sentence that says, "My one complaint," if it's all good, and that's to show you, well, I'm not totally retarded.
Here's another one.
I've got one critical muscle.
And then another one. Usually, there's many concluding paragraphs that start niggles aside.
Yes, that's the same version of niggles aside. And that's really, I believe that's true. Exactly what you're saying, Sean. Because what happens is, you have reviews, and especially with websites and stuff, you have to get these things out fast. But
I was about to say
the longer it takes you to get it out, the less people are going to care about reading it.
Right.
And the more, there's so many games coming out, and you've got to crank it out. And the only way to do that is to rely on these structures, on these boilerplates. And unfortunately, the boilerplates are largely bullshit, and that's, like, you gave an example of one. And if you've been doing it for a while, you'll recognize all the boilerplates and be like, oh, he used boilerplate C. Yep. And you just fit in the game names, The problem with that, of course, though, is, if you want useful reviews, is that it's not just that you're looking at templated writing, but I think that the template structure, the thinking, so you're not actually, it's actually the lack of insight and engagement with the game and just filling it in. And you have these really weird scenarios, maybe I could talk later today about Soldier of Fortune Payback, which I just reviewed. And browsing around, you'll see people commenting on, in one paragraph, they'll comment on, blowing people's faces off and this and that. And then the very next one, they'll say how the music's catchy. Right. To a normal person, that seems, like a sign of sociopathy, right? Very much it does. If someone's in a room and they're talking about, blowing these dudes away, and it's very lifelike, and they drag their bloody stumps across the ground, and the music's pretty catchy. You'd say, well, this is a sociopath that I'm dealing with, Yeah. But it's just a sign of the template there, but I think it's both. It's the template is making it a bad review, and the template's also preventing someone from thinking or from even understanding what they're saying. Yeah. So it's like, hey, I have to have the audio paragraph that comes after the control paragraph. And then you have those things that make you look like a sociopath because you really aren't thinking about what it is you're saying, Right. To get that one out there.
I like that one.
Right. Not to toot my own horn here, but that Greenspeak I wrote a while ago, that the Cudgel of Xanthor story,
that people still think is a legitimate.
Well, that's why I'm bringing it up because what I did there was I took this cliche that we're talking about, this format. I did the graphics paragraph, the water effects paragraph, the sound paragraph,
and you did it with like a hands-on preview.
I did. I said it wasn't a review; it was a hands-on preview. But in fact, there was nothing existed in this game. First of all, I made it up in my head. But the point was that the company itself had nothing to show me. There wasn't a game. But I still wrote about all those things, and I kept saying how great it all was.
And it was so clearly parody to us,
right? And yet I still will get emails from people saying like, "That game sounds really good." And how could it sound good? I didn't say anything.
There's the big shed on the big shed on Game Thread. No, on Game Shack. The big thread on Game Shack. And people arguing about, well, listen to this fucking hypocrite. You ever listen to GFW radio?
Oh yeah, the people who didn't get that. Yeah,
talking about writing. Well, look at this.
Right.
And then like even an employee, employee jumps in the thread and is like, oh God, did a freelancer do this?
Yeah.
I was like,
Jeff
wow,
Green's really lost it.
You were a little too subtle, I guess. Even though I thought it was beating us.
I thought it was way over the top.
I thought it was way over the top.
Yeah, same here.
But what that told me was that like that, people will just read that. If you operate within that template, you can make literally anything sound great.
Right.
I made nothing, absolutely nothing, be a game that people wanted to play.
I can't wait for this game.
This is still tied into it too, and I think that previews. I have a problem with non-evaluative hands-on previews, especially when we're talking, in the months immediately prior to the game's release, where you know that for the most part they're working eliminating bugs, and that's it. But the game that you're playing is the game that's going to be in people's hands,
right?
Give or take some of the bugs, and a lot. It's been this big debate, and it kind of EGM went through it with their Too Human hands-on story,
right?
At E3. And it's odd to me to still see people, there's this one guy, some guy was blogging about how he was calling it a review, that they misleadingly reviewed this game that wasn't done, which was really insane. I mean, not because they're in the same building and because I used to work there, but because, rationally, it was packaged in a previews feature. And when you start off, it says that this is a previews feature and that this, we're at this annual games convention where we're able to play these games. And what we're going to do is sort of evaluate our experience with these games. We're not going to give it scores that are consistent with the scoring system we use for our review section. That's later in the book. You'll see that there, and you'll see how different it is from this. We're just going to comment on these, and the reason being is to make it worth your while, right? Because there's no one that goes to these things and plays these games and doesn't form some opinion. And also, the beginning of that article pointed out that, hey, these opinions can change. Just as the games can change, and they'll change along with the game. So all that in place,
right?
Someone was freaking out about that, and a lot of people were freaking out about it.
Right. But Shawn, it's hard for some people to understand the difference between a review and a preview, kind of like IDOS showed. On their website.
There you go.
Just today, wasn't it?
It was.
Was it just when I saw the story, at least?
Yeah, I think it's gone now, but it was pointed out on Kotaku, and you can find it on NeoGAF, so you can find images of what happened. That these guys just they really want some good Kane and Lynch reviews, I think, at IDOS. They're going to some extremes. So there's
no way it could have been an accident.
Well, of course,
there were quotes taken from previews of games, and they were accompanied with 5 stars.
Right.
And they were taken from some sites that use stars, like GameSpot, and others that didn't.
And GameSpot, in fact, had reviewed the game and given it 3 stars. However, IDOS very cleverly chose to quote from a preview that GameSpot wrote before the game came out, which was a glowing preview sentence. And above that glowing sentence from the preview, they had a 5-star. Yeah. They had a 5-star logo above it.
Right. My guess is someone over there, this is total speculation, just convince themselves that it's just a design element and it's okay.
Right. We're not saying
because it's just, quote, a design element.
Right. These 5 stars actually aren't linked to these quotes.
That's crazy.
We're just separating these quotes by this cute little 5-star visual.
But I don't even buy that. There's it's such a deliberate attempt to mislead. Even if you say, even if you're it's a design element, that's basically packaging your alibi with the crime at the time that you commit the crime.
Right.
It is pure.
That's what I meant by he convinced himself.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And in fact, it's pure fucking bullshit. They shouldn't have done it. They got called on it, and in fact, now it's gone.
It does,
as if to show that they knew it was wrong.
And it does
down.
highlight the disparity between the content of previews and reviews very nicely, though, because when you look at the comments, you're like, huh? And then and then you're like, hey, well, then there's the review and it's negative.
What chutzpah though for after the Gerstmann thing to do that this week? It's like, are you kidding me?
That is mind blowing. I mean, that's like the dumbest move that anyone could.
We're not sure if everybody hates us enough yet. What could we do? Some people still are giving us some credibility here. We haven't completely shot our reputation to shit. I know, sir. I mean, what the hell?
IDOS's forums are a mess right now, too, aren't they?
Really? Well, they were over the weekend. I haven't been there lately since they got trashed. I'm sorry, Shawn. I interrupted your point.
No, that's fine. That was that needed to be said. That was a vital part of the conversation. It was. I mean, that's mind-blowing that happened. It's sad.
Yeah.
Well, about the previews thing, to finish it up. Like I've said before, game companies internally, employ people that are evaluators, and they're there to play early builds. Sometimes they just look at design documents, or they'll play late builds, whatever, and they come to these conclusions and say, this game's going to be fun, it's going to make some money. So game companies themselves very clearly believe in people's ability to evaluate unfinished product, right? But then whenever it comes to previews and you ask people, why is it that you never voice any skepticism, they say, well, because we can't, So even I don't even believe in that. I think you do have to be careful. If it's early, it's early. But a lot of times you will get a sense. I bet if you ask any of us in this floor, say, go back to the various times that you saw any given game, it probably was very much like you thought. You know, you were probably, if your gut, even if you never wrote it or told anyone, and your gut's like, this is probably going to be like a 6 game, you know, or this is really bad. This is going to be below average. Oftentimes, they turn out exactly like you're thinking.
Sure.
And I know that for a fact. But so that aside, when we're talking about hands-on previews that are immediately preceding the launch, I think that there is dishonesty there. You know, I think a lot of times they just don't – it's dishonesty by omission. You just don't say anything bad. Or sometimes, like, you can – I mean, again, not to pick on anyone. I'll pick on ourselves. We do it. Everyone does it. But just this is a convenient example I had available. And it's about Black Site because I was looking to see after I write a review, I'll often compare my perspective with other critics and see if I was like off in my own little world or what. And so this preview says, Midway showed 2 new levels of its upcoming shooter, Black Site Area 51, which got us even more excited for its November 5 ship date. The gameplay in Black Site is always a treat. And skipping ahead, Black Site is shaping up to be one of the hottest shooters of the holiday season. With 2-player co-op play, online multiplayer, and a cool blend of reality with science fiction, we're looking forward to several close encounters with Black Site when it ships on November 5. So aside from the date, the constant pimping of the date there and the sales stuff, this is... So two hands-on levels in the way that the date goes. I believe you could play 15 minutes with any level in this game and immediately understand that this is not going to be an excellent game. At least it's not going to be one that you look forward to several close encounters with, as the quote says, or...
Very clever, though.
Or to...
Get it? Close encounters?
I get it.
Yeah, that's...
I'm trying not to.
You know what? They should use that in the ad copy.
or to say that it's always a treat, So, I mean, not to just pick on that, but I see a lot of things like that. And that's why I remember when I got it and I started playing it. Remember, well, you were here, Shawn and Ryan. I kept calling you guys over. I was like, wow. Why did no one say anything about this? This is fucking unbelievable.
No one warned me.
Yeah, no one. And it was like, I know the demo was out. I never played it, the one that was on Xbox Live, It was like, why did no one ever say anything about this? This game sucks, dude. And it was like, there's no way a month ago that I would have been saying this.
Well, maybe this guy's opinion just different than yours.
Hey, even the head developer thinks that game sucks.
Well, he's not head developer anymore. He was fired. It was a great week for criticizing
don't
games.
Get in the same problem. Was he fired or did he leave?
Yeah, we don't know this, right?
I think
take
they
that
came
back.
to a mutual agreement.
I take it back. He wasn't, or we don't know.
We don't know.
But he did.
He doesn't work there
Not
anymore.
there anymore.
He did
after.
say the game was messed up,
Right.
And then after saying how messed up it was, he said but it deserved an 8.
Right.
80%.
Yeah, true. So he even in his complaints of the game, he's on the 7 to 9 scale.
Yeah.
With everybody else.
Which is crazy. I mean, what was we should have the actual quote with us. It was like this game. The development was fucked.
Development
That's
was
not
quote
saying,
seriously fucked up.
That's not necessarily
that
saying
doesn't
the
mean
game is trash.
It
but
could have.
That's
resulted
true.
in a
the
good
tone
game.
of all of his comments didn't seem to indicate any sort of confidence or pride in the thing other than the story. And I've talked about before, and that is bold, and that was a subversive move on their part. But that was kind of weird. And that, hey, in all of this, you got to point out, and that's why it's one reason why it's so frustrating when, the whole why so low thing is that,
Really,
you get
Shawn?
this pressure all the time. You have to understand anyone ever writing a review is getting the pressure, like I said, indirectly, and they're aware of it, but it's there, right? And so the one, you're like, what's the only reason to fight it, right? Aside from just like ethics, I'm an ethical person. I'm going to do the right thing as I believe it to be right. Like, well, I'm also going to be doing the right thing specifically for an audience. And then when the audience itself is actually got the publisher's back, and when the audience is demanding exactly what the publisher wants,
right? Then
you start to say, well, why am I fighting so hard? Why am I causing myself trouble?
Right.
And why are we compromising the ability of, our website, magazine, or whatever to provide, content as soon as possible
right,
and whatever.
We can't get it if our scores are
and when
too low.
when our damn audience is mad that the shit's not meeting up the expectations of the bullshit fabricated scores on the press release on the game's website.
Right. So indeed, Shawn, why so low?
Yeah.
And that was
Jeff Gerstmann's career is one of his big bullet points is that he gave Zelda an 8.8, and then the world exploded on
him. And there are people that are still arguing about
that.
Yep,
it's coming up.
Good thing he got fired. He deserved it. And it's like those people, like,
Yeah.
God, if it weren't for the sane people that are out there, like, God bless them,
Yeah.
like, I would be out of this business. Like,
There
that
are
is
sane people.
disgusting. That has, those
Right.
people are completely
I got to keep reminding myself that
mental.
too. That
Right,
there
yeah,
are good
absolutely
people
mental.
out there.
Right. 'Cause- yeah, you're right. Those people who are like good. Thank God he's gone because of that 8.8. Fuck you. You're the reason that the guys like him are out of a job.
Dude, you know the other thing about it, the whole eat a dick thing in that blog. I did hear that like they were all mad and they were insinuating, and people on their forums or whatever were insinuating that like I was a PR hack, and that was the best bit of like Orwellian logic. It was like,
I don't get that.
because it's Games for Windows magazine and Games for Windows podcast, right? Because we're affiliated with
Official
Microsoft.
magazine.
Okay, so if
capacity.
we're Microsoft PR hacks, why wouldn't we have given Crisis a 10?
Exactly. How long did it take you to reason that? It was instantaneous.
It was in my
right?
head.
But
just
there are
3
people
seconds.
still on the internet, including some that run blogs, that aren't able to make that.
I don't understand
make
that.
jump.
If right, I mean, by that logic, every game in our magazine would get a 10.
Right.
Games for Windows is great.
But instead, no, it was a move dictated. Microsoft wanted us to lowball their biggest
Oh, right.
PC game of the season.
Yeah, because that would make sense.
And lowball is in scare quotes there. So I
Glad we
gave it a
eventually
very high
came to
score.
the conclusion that people on the internet are dumb.
Except for everyone listening to this podcast.
So
You're all
that's
smart
one-
and we love you.
Yes.
I think people listening are going to wonder, well, what can we do about it? You know?
Also, and if they're
and-
wondering why we're bitching about this, the point of this is not to point fingers or to scold Cena, because again, honestly, we don't know what happened. There could have been a million complications to the Gerstmann thing. We don't know.
Right.
But with the scary part of it, and the reason that we talk about it is because it's very close to home to us for all the reasons, Shawn, that you were saying, that like these pressures really are real, and you know these barriers that we face in trying to write honest stories versus what the publishers want, what some of the audience wants, some of the fanboys want, are huge to us. And this one just really, it was scary, this Gerstmann thing, because it was so plausible.
Yeah, all it would take is, I mean, you get the right person at the top, you know, or the right people at the top, and they just change their mind about that thing, and then that's all that it takes.
Oh, yeah.
You know that all the incentives there, and it takes that one person to not be steadfast.
You've got to, I'm sure there have been a ton of times here on this floor that somebody on the other side of the building, the sales marketing side, has said out loud to other people in the room, can't we just go over and tell those fuckers in editorial to stop being so harsh? You know, they just never have actually done it.
Right.
I'm sure amongst themselves, they're killing themselves every time we publish a really mean review.
Yeah.
They got to be in there going, God
And
damn
like,
it, there goes my fucking bonus.
And they're probably thinking, like, we're trying to help you guys. You guys are shooting yourselves in the foot doing that.
right.
You know? So for the listeners that wonder what they could do, I think one, obviously, would be to don't become a raving zealot yourself when it comes to scores and demanding people's heads on pikes because they give they give Zelda 8.8. You know, that's definitely one thing. Another would be to support the sorts of content that goes beyond, hey, we got the first look, we got the exclusive look at this, we got a new bullet point to add to the list of features of this game. But hey, here's a story that, but we have to have an audience for that. If you know, we talk about those kind of stories and how they still do rely on cooperation of a publisher and stuff, but they're far less so than any of the other crap, you know. I think demand that. Don't just sit there hitting refresh on a website every 5 seconds hoping to get that extra bullet point about a new weapon, you know, or a new vehicle that's been announced in the game. And I mean, you've got to help us, you know. We want to do certain things, but it's like, hey, if the audience doesn't want it, publishers don't want it, then everyone's going to end up writing them happy press releases called previews.
I'll keep reading your story, Shawn, because I'm paid to, so it's good.
We'll be paid to
Four
write
of
'em.
us writing our own magazine
we'll
for
read each
ourselves.
other's stuff.